Welcome, and we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And I'm not sure if I got this point on the recording. We had a little bit of a discussion following the lesson yesterday, which is how to observe these particular terrible, terrible curses, but to see them as a warning for ourselves and not to see them as ways to criticize other people. God knows our inner thoughts. And for us to act with modesty and a certain level of humility and to recognize in some ways the fact that life doesn't bring these particular things upon us, at least there's a reasonable chance that we're not going to have to face these things, I think is some indication of the divine chesed, that God's kindness, in fact, reaches pretty far. At the same time, there's a very strong realization that life is brief. And there's a very strong sense of mortality. And I wonder to myself if all the improvements that have happened to society within modernity, essentially, that life for more people has become a comfortable thing, and that in the past, life was much more of a struggle than it is right now. Just consider the fact that we have indoor plumbing, just for one, but refrigeration, all kinds of things that for many, many people, many more people than in the past, makes life comfortable. But as a result, we don't recognize our mortality, and we basically want this to last forever, or somewhere in the back of our minds perhaps sort of think it will. But I think there's a strong realization that adversity that we face in this world is brief, and that there's a strong belief that there is a reward in the world to come. And of course, we have statements that state quite clearly in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, where it says that this world needs to be seen, I think, as a traklin, which I believe is an entrance chamber, because we spend a lot more time on the other side of life than we do on this side of life. So whatever gains we have in this world are brief, temporary, and we need to make sure that whatever we do to gain them is done honestly and that we won't have regrets. There is a statement in the Dhammapada that I think says it very, very well. And let me just read from the first little section. This is, of course, the sayings of the Buddha, but I want to share this because I think it says that this particular translation also says it very, very well. And I'm going to go up to the point that I'm actually making right now. The first section is called choices. And of course, that's what this chapter is about. It's about choices. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. Look how he abused me and beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Live with such thoughts, and you live in hate. Look how he abused me and beat me, and how he threw me down and robbed me. Abandon such thoughts and live in love. In this world, hate never dispels hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. You too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? When I came across this many, many years ago, I was blown away, I'll be honest with you, because I felt the truth of it was so deep. And of course, it's reflected in our own religion too, but I never came across a statement that made it so clear as that. So
I'm just blown away by it too, because I've been doing a lot of different studying with different people and different modalities. And this is the actual bottom line that I'm finding in all of these teachers is this. And it's like you said, it's just blowing me away to see it right here.
I will try and send you this PDF in, let me do that after the lesson. And I will send this PDF to you. See if I can do that in the chat, okay? Just remind me, don't let me forget. And
Okay.
the entire thing. It's about 8 chapters. It's fairly brief. You can read a lot of it in one setting, that's for sure. All right, let's keep going.
Thank you.
You bet. I'm so glad you appreciated it as much as I did. So here we're talking, of course, about abandoning this sense of the transcendent, abandoning belief in God, abandoning the mitzvot, not studying the Torah, not learning. Af ani e'esezot lachem. So this is, even I will do this to you. V'hifkadati aleichem. And by the way, the word pakad is to take note in some way. So that we have the statement, Vashem pakad et Sarah, right? God took note of Sarah is how it's translated. But it means to sort of set up. So in other words, I will set up aleichem against you. Behala, these are not easy words to translate. Behala, sudden calamity. You know that this is my reference to the Jastrow dictionary, which is really, I think there's a lovely Latin phrase for such a thing. It's my vade mecum, which means go with me. In other words, it's like a necessary part of studying to be able to look these words up. This wonderful dictionary, the Jastrow dictionary. So he translates it as sudden calamity. Et hashachefet, consumption. In other words, the body sort of wasting away is what this means. The et hakadachat, and fever or inflammation. These, again, are not easy words, but Rashi is going to try and help us understand them. So basically, we're looking at illness, right? Mechalot einayim, what it does is it dims the eyes, umedivot nafesh, and it causes the soul to be, I believe, in anguish, I think is how I would like to translate that. Uzratem larik, you shall sow for no purpose. Uzarachem, your seed, va'achaluhu oivechem, and your enemies will consume it, consume what you sow. So this really is telling us the awful consequences of moving away. And what this is also saying, if I were to say it in a positive sense, that it's dealing with the purpose of life, right? It's saying, this is why we come into this world, is to be able to live in a way that recognizes the universality of the divine and the need for us to take advantage of this gift, or should I say, this loan that is given to us, which we call our lives, and find a way to devote our lives in each way that we have, because each of us have unique ways in which to do this. And that it's not just a, it's, well, there's no fault kind of thing. It's a duty, it's a responsibility. And I think this is just, we go on and on and on. You'll see how it keeps doing this and getting worse and worse. But it's trying to just tell us and speak in no uncertain terms as to what we're capable of accomplishing within the modest gains of or modest limits of our lives. That's the real issue, right? How do we make our lives significant? And significant doesn't mean significant for us. It means significant in terms of who we are in relationship to the universe. That is a pretty heavy thing. So let's take a look. Here's the Rashi. V'hifkadati aleichem. Right, so he translates v'hifkadati, which, as you can I was trying to struggle a little bit with that translation. He says, v'tziviti aleichem, I shall command against you. Right, mitzvah, v'tziviti, I shall command regarding you or against you. Shachefet, these unusual words, right? So he says, holy, it is an illness, shemishachef et habasar, that causes the flesh to swell, right? And then there's this French word, which if you want to help me, Lauren, I'll accept it. It looks like empouiller or something like that.
It says anpole, Anpoles.
Okay. All right. Of course, because not too many of us speak medieval French, it's not real helpful. But look at how
it says it means blisters.
yes. So that's what. So look at here the German, right? The Yiddish, geschwollen, geschwollen. Right. You can tell from swelling, right? Aufgeblasen, aufgeblasen. And it means like, I think it means, okay, blasen means to blow, right? Blow out, aufgeblasen, blowing out, puffing out, puffing out. So the laws in a foreign language. And I love the way that Rashi, clearly he's writing this for someone who doesn't have a yeshiva background, right? He's trying to bring this to people who have just a modest, very modest education. They can read Hebrew, that much they can do, but he uses French words. He uses the vernacular to explain words. It's so often, you know that, right? So keeping going on, right? Domeh l'nafuach, right? To nafuach means swollen, right? And I believe this is a vav. Now, this word I really had a hard time with. I could not find this word in the dictionary. The best I could get was there's a word klala, which means a curse, right? So I don't know, right? And I think Safaria has another way of approaching this. It's escaping me for the moment, but something, kal can almost also be light, right? In other words, nefichato, so that his swelling, right? But it doesn't mean light in a good sense, right? It just means there's no substance to it, I think, right? Umar it panav, and the vision of his face, zeufa, is troubled. So in other words, clearly having, if God forbid you've ever had shingles or something like that, it's incredibly painful, and it's hard to have a smile on your face when you're feeling this way. Kadachat. Choli shemakdiach et haguf, an illness that inflames the body. In other words, high temperature, right? Umachamamo, it warms it up, it heats it up. Umav iro, and inflames it, right? Ba'er is to the fire, right? Kamo, and he gives an example, Deuteronomy 32, ki esh kadcha ba'api, for a fire is inflamed in my nostrils, which is a metaphor, or rather an expression meaning I'm getting pretty mad, not a happy camper. Machlot einaim umedivat nafesh. You can see Rashi has to really go to a lot of work here, right? Machalot einaim, illness of the eyes, umedivat nefesh, and anguish, I would say, something like that, of the soul. Ha'einaim sofot, here we go. He explains it so beautifully. He says, the eyes look out in hope, right? They look out, har hatzofim, Mount Scopus, right? The eyes look out, the chalot, and they are. It has to do with ending, something like that. That you look and what you see really disappoints you, something like that. Lirot, okay. So in other words, they strain. How about that? They look out and they strain, lirot sheyakel, to see that it'll lighten, that his illness will lighten, the yerapeh, and it will be healed, the sof, but in the end, shelo yerapeh, but in the end he is not healed, the yidavu hanefashot, and the soul becomes disheartened, right? It starts to despair. There we go. And the soul despairs. Shel mishpachto bemoto. Oh, nice. Sorry, hanefashot means the souls, right? Are in anguish. Shel mishpachto, of his family, bemoto, when he expires. Kol ta'ava, every desire, right? Or it's even more than it's somewhere between desire and lusting, right? Deep desire. She'ena ba'a, that is not fulfilled, right? You desire something and it doesn't get fulfilled. V'tochelet mimushcha, and desire or hope that is deferred, right? It's right, unrequited. Kruya kilyon einayim. He says the expression kilyon einayim is used to describe that particular sensation, that feeling. Kilyon einayim means the end of your eyes, right? Your wasting away of your eyes. Uzratem larik, and you shall sow for emptiness. Tizra'u, you will sow seed, right? The Lord titzmach, and it's not going to be very successful. It's not really going to, it's not going to grow. The im titzmach, and even if it does grow, whatever does grow, v'achluhu oivechem, your enemies will consume it. You'd think this was enough, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't generally work this way, right? I think generally, sadly, very often people resent punishments more than anything else. So I see this more from a statement kind of thing than when these things actually happen. I don't know. I think you have to sort of train yourself to look at adversity and to say to yourself, what is this trying to teach me? And I feel that that is the most helpful way to look at adversity and say, how do I turn this around and say, I have learned something very, very important from this adversity. It's changed my life for the better. Sorry, let's see what I can do let's see what I can do here. Forgive me, I don't know what I just did, and I don't know how to undo it. Let's see, zoom out. Oh, actual size, let's try that. Actual size, there we go. Let's try it. Well, didn't really help, and for some reason I got the magnification on, and I don't know how to do. Oh, there we are. Okay. Thank you. I apologize for that. Technical difficulties, right? On with the next verse. V'natati fanai bachem. I shall set my face against you. V'nigaftem lifnei oivechem, and you will be. Basically, it has to do with beaten, right? Beaten before your enemies. If you can hear the dog barking, I'm going to put in the see adversity. Let's try this. It's all getting recorded, right? I like to think that the divine has a sense of humor. Second, let's get this going here. Maybe you're being spared more of this material. Give me a moment. I have to untangle this.
Yeah, God doesn't want us to hear all these curses.
I agree. I think that's the reason. Let's try this again. See if this is working. How's this?
And what's God backwards? Dog.
Yes, very good point, but only in English. All right, let's take one. We'll take another. Okay. Your enemies will beat you right before me. V'radu bachem, they will rule over you, right? Son echem, those that hate you will rule over you. V'nastem, you shall run away, right? You shall try to escape. Ve'ein rodech atchem, without anyone who's pursuing you. You're going to be so terrified. You're going to run away from nothing. You're not even going to be chased, and you're going to be running away. So, v'natati panai, I shall set my face. So again, we had this way, this panai, and whereas the word panai means my face, if you put an aleph here between the nun and the yud, it means, as it were, I'm making time, right? I'm making time here. Panai shali, my free time. I'm going to be available. Okay, poni ani, I am going to turn away mikol iskai, from all my whatever is engaging me, lahara lachem, in order to bring this evil upon you. Remember, we had just the opposite with the blessings, that God would interrupt whatever he was doing, right? Speaking, of course, highly metaphorically, but the way in which these things were going to happen, that God was going to put his full concentration and intention on bringing us blessing, and here we're having just the opposite. V'radu bachem, and they will rule over you, right? Sonechem, those who hate you. Kemashma'o, right? It's just as it says, yishlatu bachem. So he uses the word shalit, sholet, which means, again, to rule, right? They'll rule over you. Okay, agadat Torat Kohanim mi Parsha zo. So he says there's an agadata, meaning a midrashic interpretation, or even going on to a parable or a legend, something like that, explains this. So they use this explanation. He just tells us it does it. We'd have to look at the Torat Kohanim, to the Sifra. Af ani e'esezot, okay? Even I will do this. Eini midaber, I don't speak, ela ba'af, I'm only speaking in anger. V'chein af ani, so even though it means even though, okay, af can mean even, right? He's taking the word af as meaning, all right, let's see how he's saying. Maybe he's simply saying that it uses this term, not that the word af necessarily means, no, okay, I'm going to back up and rethink this out and say, no, he's saying it's like adding on. I'm trying to get the sense of what Rashi's trying to tell us here. In other words, not only this, but even this, even this, even this, right? So v'chein af ani elech imachem imam bekeri. So here, even I will go with them bekeri. And the word bekeri means sort of in a offhanded kind of way. There's a word mikre in Hebrew, which means a happen chance or a happenstance. And it has to do with, this is a phrase that follows a statement about us following God in this sort of non-intentional kind of way, in this very offhanded kind of way. And God is saying, well, if you treat me in an offhanded way, I'm going to treat you in an offhanded way. In other words, no more protection, right? V'hifkadati aleichem, I shall set up against you. Sheyeh hamakot pokdot etchem mizo lezo. So let's try and see how we can understand this. And he's saying that these particular makot would be plagues, right? Pokdot etchem, I would say it's saying they take note of you. They get your attention is what I'm thinking. And I'm going to stop here, partially because of time and partially because I want to do some more research into this particular section before. And of course, unfortunately, this is it for this year as far as this is concerned. But with God's help, we will come back to this next year at this particular time. So I'm going to put in the marking and give you a chance while we're still recording to respond to all of this, and if you wish to. Okay, so it could be that this particular section here is he's explaining to us what the Sifra, how the Sifra looks at, deconstructs this particular section. And I'm going to stop the share with this. So this is relatively difficult stuff just to look at and sight read. So you're seeing my limitations. Any thoughts, any comments, any reactions before I turn off the recording? Okay, not hearing it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering why God allows this coronavirus to kill 1 million people, or 5 billion in the world.
Yeah.
What is going on with this particular virus? And it continues on and on and on. Is
Right.
God doing this, or are we
Well,
doing wrong
okay.
some way?
You're asking, of course, a profound question, Harlan, and one that I cannot really answer in 60 seconds or less. On a simple level, we either do believe that God is ultimately in control of all of reality and try to wrap our heads around what that means. On the other hand, God doesn't control us in the sense of the choice we make as to whether or not to take very seriously the notion of God's existence and apply that into our lives. What I can say is that there are lessons to be learned from all of this. And what exactly those lessons are, I'm not in a position to really say. First of all, I don't really know the etiology of this virus. I've read some different accounts, and whether that has to do with how we manipulate viruses and things like that, and how responsible we are for that kind of thing. On the other side of things, we should recognize and try to hold on to the fact, as I said at the very beginning of this lesson, that life is short. This doesn't in any way take away the sense of loss we have, take away the sense of loss that happened in Uvalde or any of these other school shootings where young children are taken away from their parents. And can I even begin to imagine the sense of loss that they have from a violent end to children whose hopes they carried in their hearts, or the loss that they have through illness of people, no matter what age, and the sense of loss. But there's a hope that somehow or other, there's a place in which we will all meet, and that this isn't the final, expression of what life is all about. So, yes, I do think that there's a divine cause for all these things. I feel that there are lessons for us to be learned. Certainly, we can either be stubborn about gun control, or we can not be stubborn, and that's perhaps an even greater tragedy than what's going on. Is the level to which it quite well could be preventable, and because people are being stubborn, certain people are being stubborn, it's not being addressed. And again, much more can be said, and I don't claim that I've had the last word here. So I'm going to stop the recording and wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and with hopes that this coming year will, in fact, bring blessing and that we will deserve that blessing.